Somewhere in the UK right now, Big Ange is laughing his ass off. You simply cannot succeed the GOAT himself. Meanwhile, Semenyo keeps City in the title race, and surprise, surprise, United's billionaire owner is a deplorable hypocrite. This is DMAC Daily. It's a day of mourning throughout London, except for Tottenham fans, now that their not-so-beloved manager has finally been shown the exit door. How can I adequately describe how badly this appointment turned out to be? Even for Spurs' historically underwhelming standards, this 8-month stint regressed the club even further. And look, I'll put my hand up. When Spurs first signed Frank, I actually thought this was a decent decision, all things considered. Ange's high-intensity attacking style inevitably fell apart in his second season. Yes, he delivered silverware, but he was found out in the Premier League. Ironically, his side won the Europa League final by actually resorting to pragmatism. So logically speaking, Frank seemed like a sensible alternative. A far less entertaining coach, nowhere near as charismatic, but Spurs were crying out for stability and Premier League experience back in May. Frank seemingly had both of those in abundance. 7 years at the helm of Brentford, 7 years of incremental growth from a mid-table championship club to eventual promotion to the top flight, where then in the space of 4 years, Brentford became an established Premier League team, a top 10 Premier League team. His reputation had built up for a Big Six club. If he could pull that off at Brentford, just imagine what he could do elsewhere. I mean, he'd been linked with the United job for years, but Spurs was the next chapter. And long story short, it was calamitous. Bar a handful of promising results early on in the Super Cup, away at City, the performances were otherwise dreadful, particularly at home. Just 2 wins from 13 outings. They weren't much better away from home either, which is why they're now sat 16th in the table and at genuine risk of relegation. But it was the passiveness that really rubbed the Spurs fans the wrong way. They've had pragmatic managers previously, but none were this unsuccessful. His press conferences didn't help the cause either, and then there was that comical photo of him drinking from an Arsenal cup. The optics of it all were just absurd. In the space of half a year, he'd gone from a highly respected manager to a bit of a meme. Granted, Spurs had another dismal injury record this season. That certainly didn't help Frank's cause, but having spent £230 million on new recruits and having the 5th highest valued squad in the league, the injury excuse wouldn't suffice. Interestingly, just like last season, European football had been a welcoming distraction, finishing above several giants in the UCL League phase. However, domestic results were so appalling that they couldn't keep this facade up. Unlike Pochettino, who arrived from a smaller Premier League club and took Spurs to a Champions League final, Frank never even looked like replicating something similar. So now what? Well, there's a few names that have immediately come about. According to The Telegraph, there are 3 key contenders in Roberto De Zerbi, Maurizio Pochettino, or Robbie Keane. Immediately, I think we can rule out Poch. There's no way he's ditching the US 4 months before a World Cup on home soil. No chance Trump will let Poch make Spurs great again in the immediate future. The other 2 options do make a bit more sense in different ways. De Zerbi was highly respected at Brighton before joining Marseille. His sudden availability could spark genuine interest. Meanwhile, Robbie Keane is currently coaching Hungarian giants Ferencváros. Perhaps they're looking for a Carrick-like figure to steer the ship at Spurs on an interim basis, someone that has strong ties to the club. Ryan Mason's also available, but he was pretty dreadful at West Brom recently. Andoni Iraola is another possible contender. He's been linked with the job previously, and his contract is set to expire soon. The Times are claiming he's in the mix, so who knows? Marco Silva is another shout. Quite frankly though, I'm a little disheartened at the lack of consideration for my Aussie GOAT. Why not just let Big Ange come back and finish the job by winning the Champions League and getting Spurs relegated? The script has been written. Moving to another relegation-battling English club, and I am genuinely stunned with the news that Nottingham Forest have gone ahead and sacked Sean Dyche. Now, 2 days ago, I spoke about this situation at length as rumours circulated that Dyche's job was in imminent danger if they failed to beat Wolves. Well, 48 hours later, they only secured a point despite absolutely battering them statistically speaking, but turns out the reporting was accurate. Dyche is now gone, a decision that truly boggles the mind considering Forest have only lost one of their last 6 Premier League games, but more importantly, it is the 3rd permanent manager to be shown the exit door this season. We are only in February. Their owner has completely lost his mind. It all started with Nuno Espirito Santo, a manager who delivered exceptional results at the helm. Under his leadership, Forest went from relegation battlers to European football for the first time in 30 years. But Marinakis turned sour on him over the summer, and he was gone within weeks of the 25-26 season. Then came Ange Postecoglou, whose managerial philosophy was the diametric opposite of Nuno's. This spectacular gamble lasted a full 39 days before he was infamously sacked, with Forest sat 18th in the league. So what did Marinakis do? He went for another 180, bringing in Sean Dyche, a relegation survival specialist, a manager even more pragmatic than Nuno. But the Englishman wouldn't even last a full 4 months before feeling the wrath of Mr. Marinakis. It didn't matter that he actually took Forest outside of the relegation zone whilst overseeing a Europa League campaign. Marinakis was dissatisfied, and according to Vinny Grappa of the Associated Press, he also crashed out at full-time v Wolves, storming into the Forest dressing room, loudly ranting at the players before an imminent board meeting took place with Director of Football Edu regarding Dyche's future, to which he would be fired on the spot. I'm sorry, this is no longer a football club, but rather a full-blown circus, led by a complete madman. His continuous reactionary decision-making has destroyed their season. Heading into 25-26, Forest were genuinely moving in a direction similar to that of Aston Villa, a sleeping giant that had been brought back to life. But fast forward to February 2026, and Forest are probably the most toxic club in Europe at serious risk of relegation. I have no idea who steps in as Dyche's replacement. At this point, you may as well just give Marinakis the role. He can't seem to trust anyone else, clearly. Staying in the Premier League, and there were some seismic results in the last 24 hours. Surprisingly, Forest v Wolves was the most impactful fixture, but we also saw Man City close the gap to 3 points on Arsenal, defeating Fulham 3-0. Semenyo scoring and assisting. Meanwhile, Guehi picks up back-to-back clean sheets at home. The new boys have really hit the ground running. Also, Haaland back amongst the goals too. Look, this isn't prime City. Fulham created a fair few chances. Donnarumma coming in clutch once again. But Arsenal are going to have to lock in to get the job done. Meanwhile, Liverpool handed Sunderland their first league defeat at home all season. A massive 3 points for the Reds, although Wataru Endo's serious ankle injury somewhat dampened the mood. Elsewhere, Jack Hinshelwood's late own goal sees Villa return to winning ways, but the pressure is ramping up on Brighton's manager Fabian Herzl. Time's running out for the German to turn things round. And Burnley secured a surprise come-from-behind victory away at Crystal Palace. Jorgen Strand Larsen's brace was ultimately meaningless in the end, as 3 goals in 7 minutes saw the Clarets keep their faint survival hopes intact. Elsewhere in football news, and I think I understand why Manchester United try to avoid their co-owner making public statements nowadays, because it turns out the guy is actually a repulsive individual. Now, this doesn't really surprise me. The billionaire's most notable contribution since taking over at United was the mass layoff of 450 working class employees. And you may be thinking, well, hey, United are a business. They ought to be run like one, right? Well, let's look at the average non-player salary of United. According to a study conducted by Warren Menezes of the Asterisk, United's average non-player salary as of 2024 was £31,469. Do you know how many years it would take for all 450 of those staff members' salaries combined to accumulate Ratcliffe's level of wealth? A staggering 1,235 years. You are respectfully a moron if you buy into this cost-cutting nonsense. But egregious cost-cutting aside, he's since had an interview with Sky where he has now claimed the UK, quote, has been colonized by immigrants, claiming that the UK's population has since skyrocketed by 12 million people from 2020 to 2025. But a quick look at the UK's Office for National Statistics will immediately show that claim is categorically false. In 2020, the UK's population was a little over 67 mil. In 2025, it's 69.5. Just a slight difference with those numbers there, Jimmy. He also stated, you can't have an economy with 9 million people on benefits and huge levels of immigrants coming in. Those numbers rumors are not based in any reality. Google is free, by the way, but I do find his angle of negatively implicating immigrants to be incredibly ironic, seeing as though he himself is a literal immigrant. Yes, back in 2020, when he was the UK's richest man at the time, he ditched England, switching his tax residence to Monaco in a scheme that has since seen him avoid paying upwards of £4 billion of tax. Reminder, the combined salary of those 450 members of staff that just had to lose their jobs would have amounted to around 14 mil a year. But poor Jimmy the Battler just couldn't afford to keep them on board. Separate note, does he not realize that the majority of Manchester United's first team are immigrants too? That they signed a further £225 million of immigrants this summer alone? It's funny, I do usually detest the whole keep politics out of football or sports perspective, but I gotta say, in the unique case of Sir Jimmy Tax Thief, maybe he should unironically just focus on the football, because his political statements are not just racist, they're also incredibly stupid. There are absolutely leeches in UK society, but I'm not referring to the immigrants on benefits in the UK. It's the UK billionaires that sought immigration to Monaco solely to avoid paying billions worth of tax. Every accusation is a confession. Anyways, guys, that's all for today's DMAC Daily. I'll see you next time.